Welcome back to the Escape the Clock video series, an information series where I, the author of the Escape the Clock book, walks you through how to build your program to financial freedom and early retirement. Welcome back, everyone. Last episode, we kicked things off by putting in expenses in order to calculate your cost of living. A really important place to start because with that, we actually have an idea of what kind of spending we've been doing. But now we should have one big question in mind, especially if you're thinking about quitting work, which is, how much do I need to save? Well, to answer that huge question, you need to know how much you're planning on spending. And to get there, we need to look at those expenses, look at the habits, and start to figure out what a standard cost of living might look like. Because when you're in a retirement situation, one of the only things you can really control is how much you're withdrawing and how much you're spending. And building those habits now helps you not only meet your goal faster, but it's an important lever when you're in your retirement situation. So let's jump into those expenses, figure out how to start making those important reductions, set those goals, and before you know it, you'll be able to reduce your spending and you'll be right on your way. So let's get started.
Now that we have all of our expenses loaded into a tab, we have three main goals. The first is to classify every expense in the tab. We're doing that so that we can start to standardize how we're spending. This will make it much easier to set accurate savings goals. To get there, we'll analyze our spending on a regular basis, comparing to how we're doing year over year. Even though we have three big goals here, we'll be kind of doing them all at the same time. The first one's the big one, though, which is classifying all the expenses. I'll go through a series of tips as we go to try to make that easier. Tip 1. Use the category field whenever it's available. The categories you see are going to vary from account to account. There's no standards in place, but that's why we're classifying. So whenever you have one of those, use it as a context clue for what you want to set. That leads us to our next tip, using the other field when there's not a category. Between the date, the description, the amount, you should have a lot of different clues about what you are spending on and how to classify it. You can actually do a lot of research just from the description alone. Looking it up just in a general web browser or with a different account statements should help you get closer to what that was. There can be multiple possibilities for classifying a given item. There's no wrong answer. It's completely up to you. Just make sure you're consistent so that you're comparing apples to apples over time. Also, you can change the default list that I've provided you. If you do so, make sure you update the actual name in the expense report, though, so that it matches. That way, it'll automatically pull it in. You may notice that things are already grouped. Use the sort functionality on description or category to put things together to make it easier to update them in bulk. Exporting your transactions will only get you so far. Tip number 4, go look up your account statements or look at the reports that you receive and provide extra data into the sheet. This can help you find extra opportunities to reduce costs or understand why costs are changing. As I go through the exercise, different patterns will start to emerge. These are opportunities to analyze in order to start to reduce and control spending. For example, here I can see all listed out, all the spending that we've been doing on meals at school throughout the year, giving me an opportunity to analyze them and create plans to reduce the amount of spending, such as packing lunches. Which brings me to one of the most important tips of all, tip number 6, to classify with purpose. Tagging the item is useful because it gives us an overall amount spent, but classifying it with the intent to make a change or to monitor it within a limit allows me to really make progress towards my goals. Tip 8, be mindful of which account was used for each transaction. This is why we added the account during the import process. For example, here you can see that a qualified medical expense went on my credit card instead of my health account. But that's okay. I'm able to take an action item to go in and file a reimbursement request to get that money back. The first time you do this exercise, you might find yourself tripping up on how to classify an item of a certain type for the first time. That's completely fine. For example, I did that here when it came to tips for home grocery deliveries. Do I classify this as a fee? Do I classify this as part of my food budget? Do I classify this as giving? Or maybe even other? It just depends on how I intend to analyze, measure, and improve that as part of my cost of living going forward. So it might take a little bit of reflection, but this is part of the process itself. You might find this tricky with retail items. They can be a mixed bag of things. If not all of one type, they're not easy to classify. If unsure, just use other. At least in that case, you're not overcounting in another category. As we go through and classify items in the sheet, we should always be thinking of actions we can take. That's when comments come in. It allows us to provide a context sensitive to do item for us to go and follow up on later. If you're reading the book or following the other series, you'll understand that we're building a program plan here. The comments are tasks that can be put into a cost reduction project, meaning that as you go in and you resolve those comments or complete those tasks, you're making progress towards a financial milestone. Sometimes you need to store information, but it's not a one time action. That's when you can put a note in. For instance, here I'm putting in that I actually tracked this travel expense as part of a budget. Between all your comments and notes, a plan will form by the end of the classification process. I ended up paying quite a few foreign transaction fees on a trip. Having more cash up front could have avoided this. As you go through the exercise, you should be able to identify different patterns of behaviors. Take that as an opportunity to improve future spending. For example, I see there's definitely a pattern of putting the wrong medical transactions on the wrong card. This has created a lot of work for me if I want to get all that money back. So instead, I can resolve to make sure that everyone in the family knows to always use the right card when it comes to spending at that location. Another benefit of doing this process is that it makes it easy for me to get an accounting of all my giving at the end of the year for when I do my tax deduction. I can even create a view that filters down to the classification of giving, just seeing everything all in one place. No field is off limit, it's your data. You can even change the description field to match something that's more easy for you to identify. Here I don't like all the noise that's in the data, so using a simple find and replace, I can just remove that in one click. I could even bold, color, or highlight the field if I wanted to. I can even use more advanced functionality like regular expressions to really get at cleaning the data. It's all really starting to come together, but remember, the goal is to classify all the expenses. So for my next tip, I'm going to take you through how to make sure you don't miss anything. As you finish up, you might think I need to go back through it all again. Instead, consider using a filter. Simply add a filter onto the classification header, unselecting everything except for blanks. This will just show you everything that doesn't have a tag on it at the moment, allowing you to quickly go ahead and burn down the rest of the items. Even when you're done, you might want to do one additional step, which is revisit everything you classified as other. Classifying things this way can kind of throw off your accounting, so it's best to go and see if you can classify them better if possible. For example, here you can see checks, which I had to set as other because it was hard to classify them. But now I can go and take the extra step to go and reference and look up based on the check number and other information so I can put a proper classification in place. Now that everything has been classified, I'm ready to do final analysis. To do so, I just go back to my list, doing different types of sorts, sorting on date, amounts, description, whatever I want. I can even create different views so it's easy for me to go and really drill down based on different groupings of things. My goal here is to really see the spending, understand it, look for opportunities to make changes. This is going to allow me to better understand how much I really need to save and better understand, am I really making the most out of my money? We're now ready to do our last goal, which is analyzing the data at an aggregate level. This is where the annual reports come in. You have a default one in the planner already. You can create one for any year. Just make sure that you put the correct year in the header of the report, and it will automatically do the queries for you. Each expense listed has to match an item in the drop-down list. Doing so will have it automatically pull in the right monthly and yearly breakdowns. As I go through the report, I can get a better understanding of where I'm spending. I can see that I might be spending more on fuel or charging than I might have intended I might do, or that my insurance rates are pretty high. I can take notes on any one of these categories, and therefore take an action item to go and try to reduce it. I can always create another expense report for the next year, which will then compare it to the previous year, allowing me to see if my actions actually made progress or not. In this case, I decided to create a budget on eating out, as well as canceling a few more subscription services, trying to reduce closer to my target cost of living. There are a lot of strategies to make progress here, which I cover extensively in the book and also in the other video series. So tune in there to try to get more ideas on things you can do to get these numbers where you want them. As you finish the notes here, think of this as a shareable report. You can use the file export functionality to send a PDF or an email attachment to your partners, financial advisors, or even your loved ones to help make progress toward your goals. The last two tips are about using those comments that you were capturing. Those comments create a nice action list, which, if you follow the book, you'll see it's about making a project plan towards a financial milestone. Moving all those comments into your project as tasks gives you something you can work toward your goals. And in this case, it's taking a current cost of living, which is your baseline, and getting it closer to your target cost of living. So as you go in and you take these actions to reduce spending, you'll actually see yourself moving closer and closer to your goal.
And that's it. I know there's a lot to going through so many line items because we spend on a lot of things. But by going through this, we start to learn things about ourselves, our families, just all kinds of things, which is a really important part of the journey itself. And hopefully you find that time actually really useful, as monotonous as it can feel at different moments, because you'll start to go, oh, wait, hey, should this have jumped there? Shouldn't this be cheaper? Wow, am I really spending this much on that? And over time, you'll start to build a muscle about asking questions before you take on new debt, or about knowing how much money you actually need. Or you might have that, thought in your head, should I really buy this thing? Do I really need this thing? And those add up over time. So it's a really important step. And I think what you might find is doing it at least annually, you're going to really be in control, and you're going to have more and more confidence that the money you're saving is the money you need, which is huge. So great first step on getting all of your expenses under control, cost of living's understood, but what is actually cost going to look like in 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 years? Well, next episode, we're going to peer into the crystal ball and start to answer that question. I'll see you then. Quick reminder, I'm a retired program manager, not a financial planner or a fiduciary. All the information presented here and in the Escape the Clock book is expected to be reviewed with a certified professional. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Support the show by visiting escapetheclock.com, where you can find the guide, the planner, and more episodes. If you need help with building or running your program, you can schedule help at the site. If you, a friend, or loved one is feeling trapped by work or money, let them know about escapetheclock.com. Remember, time is your most valuable asset. Start living life on your terms and escape the clock.